Okay. Well, we've come to the end. In a special fireside chat to headline our inaugural Delaware Legislative Summit, I'm very pleased to welcome Governor-Elect Matt Meyer. A former teacher, lawyer, diplomat, and entrepreneur, Matt has served as county executive for Newcastle County for the last 8 years. He won that role in an upset race, just as he did again this year, becoming the first county executive ever elected governor. Please welcome Matt Meyer in his first live interview.
And the unemployed Matt Meyer.
That's right. I was actually going to ask you, as of yesterday, you are no longer running Newcastle County, so congrats on that.
First of all, for 8 years, Newcastle County's been running me. You can ask my wife.
That's right. Now it's just your wife and your son running your life for the next few weeks.
That's right. And beyond that, yeah.
I wanted to maybe start there. How has this transition period really gone for you? What's been the most surprising part?
So, first of all, thank you, Jake. Thanks for everyone at Can we give Spotlight a round of applause? I mean, this was, I don't know if it's completely historically accurate to say Allison, where it was a wild dream of Allison, I don't know, 25 years ago? No, like 3 years ago, that you worked very, very hard to turn into fruition. It's very quickly really become an institution and a critical part of our democratic process. So thank you for you and for all of Spotlight staff for what you do when you report accurately about the things that we're doing. I appreciate it. And also to everyone here, honestly, it's very humbling to have been elected governor. I was told at a conference of governors a few weeks ago that no one in the history of the country has gone in 10 years from being a public school educator to being governor of a state. And I really appreciate, I'm humbled, I can't believe, thank you. I still kind of can't believe my team at the county has spent a lot of time, Vanessa Phillips, who's the outgoing chief administrative officer of the county, now the incoming chief of staff for us in the governor's office. Give her a round of applause, yes. John Starkey knows that chief of staff deserves some love, as does Drew Fennell. But that, the fact that the people of Newcastle County gave me their confidence to come in and gave us a shot to run things. I hope some of you saw the piece that we produced. I'm humbled by that, and similarly at the state, we're spending the next 10, 11 days rolling up our sleeves so we can get off and running January 21st. I also should add that after November 5th, after Election Day, we just got bombarded by invitations to all sorts of things. And I think a lot of you know I'm a yes guy. I'm like, we can do this, and I can just stay up a little longer, and we'll figure it out. I was saying no to most things, and then by the time December came around, I said no to everything, including this. But the more we looked at it, we said, hey, we want to come out and at least say thank you and communicate some of what we plan to do. Understand it's still very much in formation. As soon as I leave here, I'm going right back into job interviews to build a team. So thank you very much, and it's an honor to be here. I also should say, as a former teacher, like last period of the day, it's really hard to keep people's attention, especially when Deshaun Jackson just flew through the building. So we hope we can make this interactive, engaging in some way.
So, talking about that transition a little bit, and talking about your role as a former teacher, you've named more than half your cabinet members to date. One of the biggest roles that you haven't filled, and we're still waiting on, is Secretary of Education. That's obviously a topic that you're very close to and interested in. I'm curious what the conversations on that role are like, and whether or not Secretary Holodick is, even in consideration to be kept on.
I think it's really important to me that our Secretary of Education be someone who's been an educator and also has real interest in getting in and doing really hard things. I think when you look at what's happened in our education system here in Delaware, and our K-12 education system over the past decade, 2 decades, 3 decades, the trend lines, quite frankly, are not good. A lot of my peers do not want to send their kids to their neighborhood public school. It's not acceptable, and if that's the case, that's no way to build a community in a thriving state. The ideas are there. As I look around this room, there are a lot of people who have headed commissions, served on committees, been on boards, written reports. The reports are there. The ideas are there. I don't think we need a Secretary of Education to come in and start doing a study of what needs to get done. A lot of it is figuring out how we get the right people around the table, quite frankly, how we get the votes in the legislature, and figuring out what exactly is that path and what are those specific bold things that are going to have direct and serious impact on not only the educational outcomes that our kids and families get, but on the equity of outcomes. Because from my point of view, there's an issue with regard to overall outcomes. Overall results are not where they need to be. But in addition, the inequity is particularly troublesome and unacceptable. So that's what I'm looking for in a Secretary of Education, a partner and a leader who can get us there. And we're getting close. We should have an announcement in 7 to 10 days. Certainly by the time I'm inaugurated, January 21st, we'll have an announcement.
Awesome. One of the things we did for this conference was we asked our readers, our supporters, to come up with some questions for you. And actually one of them pertains to the cabinet, and actually a role that's not actually a cabinet nominee, but one of our readers asked whether or not you supported House Bill 1, which would create a Department of Veteran Affairs secretary as a cabinet level branch. And this is, you of course spent time in Iraq as a diplomat, spent time around our military. Is that something you would consider?
Yeah, one of my last days in Iraq, I lived on a base in Iraq, in Mosul, Iraq. We leave the base 3 or 4 days a week to go and meet with Iraqis. And when I left, I was a diplomat, and we had a protection platoon with 4 MRAPs, 4 tanks that would take us out. And one of my last days, we were coming back to the base after a long meeting. I was in a big hurry to get back to a meeting with a senior military officer in the base, and the convoy we were in stopped. And it stopped because something that looked like a paper bag, like a lunch bag to me, was sitting in the middle of a road on the outskirts of Mosul, Iraq. And I was furious, to be honest. I held my temper, but I made it clear to my protection platoon, like, enough with this nonsense, drive around the bag and get us back, because I had to get to this meeting. I had a few days left in the country. It turned out they came out with the explosive ordnance team, and they found that there was a bomb in that bag, and there was a tripwire. And thank the Lord that those 23-year-old kids running our platoon thought to stop and take it really seriously. It is totally unacceptable and un-American that those same kids come back to an America that doesn't find a place for them, doesn't have acceptable health care for them, doesn't have acceptable jobs for them. It's vitally important to me that in Delaware we do that. We have a Division of Veteran Affairs in the Department of State. We are looking at, I know there's a movement to make it a cabinet level department. If there's going to be true result, I don't want to create a cabinet level department just for the sake of creating a cabinet level department, but we're looking at it, and if there is real value to be had for veterans and for our communities, we will make it a cabinet level department.
Great. And thinking about, talking about the legislature and what it's going to actually take to enact this agenda, I know you've seen some of our coverage of what we're calling the Meyer Plan. Thank you so much for writing so many of your thoughts actually into a published document. But, Dover's really seeing a true outside governor for the first time since maybe Pete DuPont. And Russ. So, how are you navigating the necessary relationship building in Leg Hall to actually get your agenda passed? Have you started meeting with legislators? And, are you going to lean on maybe Lieutenant Governor-Elect Kyle Evans-Gay to help you move that agenda?
Yeah, I think because I'm the first non-statewide elected official elected governor in 50 years, people treat me like I moved here from Mars. Like I don't know these people. They're freaking out, man. I mean, the legislators in Newcastle County, the representatives and senators, I've been talking to them extensively on a wide range of things for for 8 years. I already knew a number of the legislators in Kent and Sussex, and we're working to get to know people better. Obviously, I'll be working with them much more closely every day. We've already started regular meetings with the state, Senate, and House majority and minority leaders. We've met with the leadership. We have set up meetings with actually each member. We're in the process of setting up meetings with each member. It's a collaboration. And it's, I imagine, my message to them, similar to actually what I say to county employees, or what I've said to county employees on their first day, is we're not going to agree on everything, but there are some basic values that we share. We have an obligation to deliver. I think the message from this election that I got, or one clear message, is that our schools aren't where they need to be, housing is too expensive, and healthcare is inaccessible and too expensive for too many Delawareans. And as long as we collaborate together, come together in a respectful way with our different ideas to deliver on those promises, we're going to be okay, whether Democrat, Republican, suburban, urban, rural.
So even though many of our members of our state house obviously didn't support you in the primary, and many of them supported some of your opponents. Shout out Nnamdi Chichoko, I guess, for being one of the few. So do you just kind of look at that as bygones be bygones, and you're going to move on, or is there still this sense that there's some relationship building to go on down in Dover?
I've had an amazing relationship with our county council, 13 county council members. Any county council member, right away I can list 5 things with each of them that we had vehement disagreements on. So I guess one thing I disagreed with a number of the state house on is who the next governor should be. And one thing you never want to be is a sore winner, right? So with everyone, we sit down, and hopefully, next time around, I got to talk to my wife, if there is a next time, I'll earn their support. But I do have to shout out Nnamdi Chichoko, was my one endorsement, I think, in the country.
I'm going to ask him for lotto numbers next. Talking obviously about what we're going to walk into here in just a matter of a couple weeks. You've now seen, I don't know what to call him, former Governor John Carney now, I guess. Mayor John Carney's recommended fiscal year 26 budget. The latest projections show that budget limit is going to top $7 billion for the first time. And you're actually inheriting a state budget that's much stronger than your 2 predecessors inherited. But at the same time, as we heard during the legislative panel, some of those projections are showing that revenue is going to get weaker as we go out. And one of the challenges we've seen from the state assembly is it seems like every year we add 7%, 8%, 9% spending that often outpaces what we have in revenue. Is that something that you look at with concern? Are you not as concerned about the headwinds that may or may not be a couple years out? And how do you kind of look at things from a budget perspective, in which you did a fairly good job in Newcastle County kind of keeping tight?
You're asking the easy questions, Jake. There's been a tremendous amount of turnover in our legislature in the past 5 to 10 years, which I think is a great thing. The degree to which both our state house and state senate reflects the diversity of our population. It's not perfect, but it's better than it has been at any other time in our state's history. That's the good. One of the downsides of that is that in terms of state budget, we've gone through a pretty good stretch, to Governor Carney's credit and the legislature's credit, a pretty good stretch of prosperity, where the legislature has, most of their fights are about where to spend these additional resources. Whereas a few of the people, like Senator Sokola, who was up here, I think he was there back in 2008, 2009, as a few others in the room may remember, when there were really, really hard budget decisions. When you have an $800 million deficit, right, which back then was close to you got to cut a budget close to 15%. You have an obligation to make sure kids are getting quality education, healthcare, housing. And so that's a long way of saying there is some concern that if that day comes, right, in the next 4 years while we're sitting in that seat, it's going to be really hard, because there are going to be a lot of people around the table who haven't experienced that before, who are used to going to the OMB, to the budget office, who are used to going to the Secretary of Finance and making their demands for this program and that program, when maybe we may be in a place to protect stuff. So listen, I think budgets, as you might know, President Biden likes to say, budgets ultimately come down to values, who you are, and our budget's going to reflect that. There will be revisions to the GRB. We'll probably keep a considerable amount of Governor Carney's recommended budget, but there will be changes to it based on the values that we believe we were elected to execute on.
And obviously, one of the ways that Governor Carney was able to hand over a fairly robust budget in the black for you is through the use of what he called the Budget Stabilization Fund, basically this side pot of savings that in case of emergency you can always kind of draw from, or if you had a particular project that you wanted to kind of draw from. Is that, and there was a move to perhaps write that into the state code that didn't happen. So I think as of January 21st, that, is up to you whether you want to continue using that mechanism. Is that, basically pinching off a small amount of dollars every year to put it off to the side in case of emergency? Is that something you would like to see the state continue to do, or do you have a different financial strategy?
I think it's important to budget conservatively, fiscally conservatively, not politically conservatively. I also think it's important that if we're asking residents to write us a check, or more accurately, put their money into the computer to send us, if we're asking residents to pay us tax every year, that tax should be an accurate number of what we're going to actually spend. I'm not a big fan of collecting excess revenue and socking it away for a rainy day. I certainly have hesitations about doing that when it is a rainy day in a lot of corners of the state. For the kids I taught on the east side of Wilmington, it's a rainy day right now. It's a rainy day if you can't afford childcare for your kids. It's a rainy day if your kids aren't reading and can't get any additional assistance. That's the approach we're going to take when residents of the state send us their taxes, when we get fees. We have an obligation to use that in a very responsible way, in an efficient way, but to spend it. If we're going to hold on to it, I'd rather you hold on to it.
Part of that thinking is why you cut county taxes marginally last year as well?
Yeah, I should highlight that as county, I'm the first county executive, along with mostly Vanessa Phillips. I talk about it, but she did the work. We're the first administration ever to reduce county taxes, because I think once reserve levels get to a certain point, we're not like a private company that needs to keep accumulating wealth. It's your wealth, and we should ultimately give it back.
We heard some discussion on tax policy in the last panel, and one of the things that's been floating around is this idea of, do we need a higher top-level tax bracket? I think proposals above 250 or above 150 a year for an individual in terms of income tax. Do you see that as a viable way to maybe fund some of these big-ticket items that everybody keeps talking about, or is a change to the income tax bracket not something you're hot to engage with?
Jake, I spent about 2 years of my life calling 3/4 of the people in this room, begging them for a few dollars so I can make TV commercials that said that I don't think it's right that Delaware families making $70,000 a year pay the same tax rate as Delaware families making $70 million a year. And that's not an election slogan. That's something we're going to stand by. We don't know. We're looking at whether it makes sense for this year or for future years. And where we are with our revenue situation. We're also looking, Newcastle County residents know I also like to reduce taxes for working people. So we're going to look at the range and see what makes sense. But I do think that there is a place for certain brackets and income sectors to pay different amounts.
Sure. And one of the things we heard earliest today was the discussion about, again, the issue maybe closest to you, public education funding, and this AIR report that has said we may need to spend upwards of $1 billion more annually to really get the educational outcomes that we're looking for. Obviously, raising taxes on high earners would be one way to help pay for that, but is somebody that spent time in the classroom and is maybe taking a look at this issue supportive of this idea that we need to add almost a 1/5 of the state budget to the annual budget in order to support better educational outcomes, or do you think other reforms could accomplish these goals?
Is anyone here from Laurel? Not to call out Laurel, but Laurel, I don't know how many of you saw, Laurel a few months ago went to COVID-style virtual learning.
Yeah, I saw that.
Not because of any health issue, but because of teacher shortages. Like, this is ridiculous. In 2020, we can do extraordinary things. I can, take as my cousin, like I can fund my cousin's company. I can take out my phone right now and do insane things, but we can't get enough teachers in our schools. So I'm not going around saying we're going to double your taxes or do anything like that, but we got to find a way to move money around, because some of it is, as a teacher, I know that teacher salaries matter, but also there's a lot of money in the system that's not getting to classrooms and not getting to where we need it to go. Tom Carper, who, God bless Tom Carper, the last Vietnam veteran to ever serve in the U.S. Senate, he likes to say, when you're dealing with a big system, see what's working and just do more of that, and find out what's not working and do less of that. And so I think you're going to see a lot of that. And if it costs money to make sure kids are reading, we're going to find the money to make sure kids can read and do math. I'm a math teacher, and do math.
With that in mind, do you, when you look at, you have 4 years now to really accomplish as much of your agenda as you can, and possibly more, but do you look at this first year as like, okay, this is going to be my education year, or this is going to be my, my land use policy or my affordable housing? Do you look at like there's one thing by the time December 31st rolls around you really want to have checked off your list?
I don't know if I'm allowed to give away all my secrets before January. I mean, you guys are going to be like,
I'm going to get it out of
We
them.
don't even need to go to the inauguration or hear the speech. We got it all.
That's right.
But I think, for me, I think my team at the county knows well, I think in threes. I read something years ago that the human brain deals well in threes. And there's going to be a lot of focal areas. There's a danger in a crowd like this. He didn't say my thing. But education, housing, and healthcare are certainly top of mind for myself and our administration. Those three things, in terms of cost of living, in terms of creating future opportunity, and creating equities across our community. I think if we really address the core of those issues, I think we'll be making progress in a lot of ways that can move Delaware forward.
One of your predecessor, John Carney's major initiatives was the launch of the Delaware Prosperity Partnership. I'm curious how you gauge the effectiveness of that organization and whether you plan to engage it in the same way when it comes to economic development efforts.
Yeah, there will be changes in terms of how we do economic development. I think I'm the first governor in a while that owned a small business and ran a small business. I have much more of a small business orientation. I have not been shy about saying I'm not a huge fan of giving large tax breaks for out-of-state companies to come. I'm not going to say we're never going to do it, but we're going to be very strategic about making sure that companies that come here are creating a long-lasting impact on communities, and trying to figure out how do we invest to make sure that for kids coming out of school or individuals who are mid-career and experienced and looking to start and grow a business here, this is without question the best place in the region, if not the country, to start and grow your business.
So do you look at maybe small businesses as really a backbone to job growth, rather than trying to swing for $100,000, $200,000, $500,000 job projects, and instead trying to find ways to look at mom and pop shops and figuring out how do we get 10 more employees in that business as maybe a way to do economic
It's not
development?
necessarily an either or, right? But we are really focusing and rethinking. I probably shouldn't say this because you can probably FOIA it, but I wrote an extensive paper. I was a junior staffer for a few months for Governor Markell, and wrote a paper on how to make Delaware the startup state, how to make it a great place for people to start and grow their company. And I've always believed if you have $100,000, $200,000, $1 million to invest in economic development, investing to make sure that the stars coming out of Delaware State University will create their company in Delaware, will be well-funded, will be able to hire, will be able to connect with customers and grow their product. That's a much better investment. Like, you go to them, $100,000 is a huge amount of money. You go to a lot of these, public corporations around the world looking to come here, $100,000 is nothing. And so it's about growing our future, saying how do we take, 100 companies that each have 10 employees and help them each get 3, 4, 5 more employees. That's often, I think, a much more efficient investment of your taxpayer dollar than trying to get these big wins.
When you think about entrepreneurism, what do you feel like these political operatives, what do you think they forget or don't understand about the entrepreneurial experience? Because you took time to grow eco-sandals, to grow e-commerce in Africa, and when you look at what that experience really taught you, what do you feel like is missing from the equation today to help other entrepreneurs like yourself kind of get going?
I think it's an ecosystem, right? A lot of times when people think about entrepreneurship, they think capital, right? How do we get them money? The best entrepreneurs need a lot more. Money is almost like a vehicle, right? It's a vehicle to research and develop the product more, or a vehicle to connect with customers. So I think, or to hire people, right? And so we need to think about what are those key levers, right? For me, when I started a sandal company, a lot of it was about customers. I was constantly stressed. Anyone doing retail knows the biggest stress starting out is how do you get customers? So are there ways we can bring expertise together from across our state or from various communities across our state and create a hub, a place for entrepreneurs to go to have sort of a one-stop shop to help you to connect with customers in your new venture? And we can do that in a number of stress points. We found in Newcastle County recently, getting financing was a huge stress with interest rates rising. We partnered with Discover Bank, which may be Capital One now, I think it's still Discover Bank, to create something called the Grow NCC Fund, which is low interest financing for small businesses that want to grow. Looking at programs like that, just where are the stress points? And in every industry, it's a little bit different, and making sure we're enabling people.
Another one of the Carney administration's big projects was the expansion of the Port of Wilmington and the building of a new container port at Edgemoor. And I know you spent time down there during the ILA strike recently. But a recent court rulings put the future of that project into question. And I know Senator Skoll is arguing that they're still very much appealing that. But I'm curious, do you support the Edgemoor project, which aims to, lean more on containerized, mechanized work rather than unionized work? And if so, do you still plan to continue fighting for the progress on that project?
So the port is a critical element of our state's economy. It provides critical jobs in a community of Wilmington where quality jobs like that are just hard to get. The problem is that the industry is going in many ways in a different direction than the Port of Wilmington, where you need automation, you need containerization if you're going to survive. If you don't do it, it just gets worse and worse, and either you got to close it down or there has to be increasing public subsidy. So I think the Edgemoor Port, in theory, is a good idea. To be honest, we haven't even gotten our hands on all the documents. Like you, right? We haven't seen everything. We're gonna take a new look at everything and see what's in the best interest of moving Delaware forward. For years and years, there's been significant public subsidy of the port, and in at least 3 occasions I can think of, there have been attempts to bring in a private operator that have not gone particularly well. So we're going to take a new view of it and see what we can do. Whether I think the Philly ports are really interested in collaborating, or at least they say they're interested in collaborating. Thus far, we've thought that the best approach is competing, and we have some strategic advantages where we can win. We're going to look at it and see what's in the best interest of creating, preserving, and growing those jobs for the long term.
You're also well acquainted with the challenges of land use planning. That's really become an issue both up where I am in Middletown, as well as down in Sussex County. There was a lot of controversy this year over the Newcastle County's comprehensive plan. You ultimately kind of undid that process and sent it back so the public could have more say in that. The similar controversy discussions brewing in Sussex County. But considering those concerns and Delaware's small size, do you think the state government should have more of a role and be more involved in land use planning
question is, do we think state government should be involved in land use planning that's traditionally been a local function?
Correct. Yeah, it's in other states there are departments of planning that I know. For instance, your former Department of Land Use worked as the Department of Planning Secretary in Maryland, and they had a much more hands-on role in terms of where development should go.
So I don't have surveys on it, but I find Delawareans like Delaware. And one reason we like Delaware is there's a quality of life here that you don't get in a lot of other big places. And certainly on the Mid-Atlantic, there's a cost of living that's reasonable. You know, people complain about traffic here, and then you spend a rush hour on the Washington Beltway, right? And you're going to be there a few hours, no matter where you're going. And we come back, and it's like, we're back in Delaware. The problem is, and especially in post-COVID times, when people are more mobile than ever, where a lot of workplaces are saying, we don't really care where your office is, you can go anywhere. They're choosing a place with higher quality of living. And it's more than in the southern areas of Newcastle County, Middletown, some here in Kent County as well, but especially down in the beach areas of Sussex, it's really creating a crisis where not only is traffic ground to a halt. Not only is it impossible now to get a restaurant reservation, but more urgently, you can't get a doctor, right? Did I say something wrong? All right, switch. This is like running one of those shuttle runs, the relay. No, but it might take 6 months, a year. And so these are all problems we need to roll up our sleeves and work hard on it. So the challenge is that the way Delaware government is structured, I know this as someone, I like to say I was elected county executive as a pissed off teacher, and now I was elected governor as a pissed off county executive. The way Delaware government is structured, a lot of municipalities and counties can say, that's not my problem, right? I'm not going to worry about the municipality. That's a municipal problem. They'll worry, and everyone ends up pointing their finger, and we as Delawareans are just kind of like, well, the problem's getting worse and worse, and who's going to stand up and fix it? And I think it's our job in state government to stand up and fix it. We have an affordable housing crisis where, according to, I don't know if Rachel Stucker's here, but the Housing Alliance of Delaware, sorry, hiding, hey, Rachel, according to the Housing Alliance of Delaware, we're short 22,000 affordable, it's 20,000 affordable housing units, right? And so if I go to certain people in Newcastle County government, where I used to work until yesterday, they'll say, oh, that's not our problem. Like the city of Wilmington, city of Newark, and Middletown can take on, additional housing units. That's where density is. People that really don't want it out here. And then you go to the city, they're like, how come we always have to do dense house? So everyone's pointing their fingers. I think the state government does have a critical role in making sure, particularly with housing, but also with healthcare. State of Florida, so just my wife's an emergency room doctor, and so she's lectured me on this. Every time I stand up and talk about a medical school, I do believe in a medical school. We're going to take steps very early on in my administration towards getting the first medical school in Delaware, one of 4 states in the country without a medical school. On the other hand, one counter-argument of a medical school is actually the leading determinant of where someone's going to practice medicine in their career is not where they go to medical school, it's where they do their residency. And so if you have a medical school but don't increase residency slots or change that in some way, you're going to likely have a same or similar problem. The problem with increasing residencies, and there are probably people in the room who know more about this than I do, is it depends on the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid in Washington, federal government, to determine how many residency slots you get. They pay for them. What I've learned is actually they pay for them, but Florida recently decided, because Florida has a lot of seniors, has problems similar to parts of Florida, healthcare problems similar to what Sussex County has. They just invested close to $1 billion to create additional residency slots from the state government. Now, I'm not saying, our budget, our numbers here are smaller than Florida. I'm not saying we're going to throw out $1 billion for a residency slot, but we're going to look at creative ways to make sure in the near term, medical school realistically 4 or 5 years in soonest, we'll be bringing doctors or bringing individuals to be trained as physicians or nurses to our area. But when you do something like residency slots, that's something the state government can do to have a dramatic impact immediately. With respect, not to make this too long, but I can talk after 8 years as county executive, I can talk about land use for a long time. I think that the Office of State Planning, we're going to work to change that function some, so the state government is providing additional protection, particularly for coastal communities of Sussex County, who, with respect to climate change and with respect to just traffic and convenience, I feel like when I see their life aren't really being protected the way they should be.
Before we get off land use then, right after Christmas, and you made the decision to veto a measure from County Council regarding impact fees, and which would essentially raise the cost of housing on developers, cause some controversy from County Council. How do you kind of square that with also this need for more housing, and whether or not more assistance is needed? Maybe just explain kind of your veto.
In fairness, I made the decision years ago, not because they've been talking about impact fee increases in Newcastle County for years. So what an impact fee is when you, when a builder, when a developer constructs a new house, that has an impact on fire, on schools, on various services, parks, libraries. And so there's an impact fee for each of those services assessed on the home. They periodically get increased. I've always said throughout my time as county executive, I have no problem increasing fees, increasing taxes, maybe I shouldn't say that, but making increases as long as you can show me that we're raising revenue that's actually going to be invested to produce some public benefit. I don't believe in increasing taxes or increasing rates just for the sake of increasing taxes or increasing rates. I mean, you've even seen, I don't even believe in keeping tax rates the same. Like if there's money to be given back, we reduce them. So it just needs to be rational and sensible. What County Council did is they said, we haven't increased impact fees in a while, so we're just increasing them across the board. I think there are serious problems, even in Newcastle County, probably less so than areas of Sussex County, but there are areas that need additional investment, but raising impact fees like that across the board just doesn't make sense. I had a conversation with my successor. We had an amazing transition. Anyone from Newcastle County, please support and work with Marcus Henry. He's going to be a great county executive. Yeah, give Marcus a round of applause. And I talked to Marcus, and I just said, listen, you can do this if you want. On my watch, my belief is if you're going to raise fees, you can raise fees. I'm a Democrat. I believe in public investment in things that are good and make sense, but I don't believe in just raising fees on people just for the sake of raising fees, and that's particularly true when I can count 20 families right now I know that are looking for homes and finding difficulty either affording the rent or finding a mortgage.
Moving to maybe our last segment, I recently interviewed Mayor Carney. He said he was concerned about a new wave of progressivism kind of usurping the traditional Delaware way mindset.
Was he talking about me?
Well, I'm curious what you think of that. And he was, I think, mainly concerned about a more partisan brand of Delaware politics and one driven more by a younger set of legislators. And I'm curious your thoughts on that and whether you consider yourself to be progressive.
I'll take the last question. The things I've read about myself, mostly I don't read them. My mom reads them, and then she gives them to me, and then she argues with my wife about what's true and what's not true. In terms of I really don't like labels. I really genuinely don't like labels, and especially in Delaware, which I was trying to explain to Deshaun Jackson, who's from California, you're coming to a village. He's like, oh my God, I'm talking to the governor. I'm like, no, I'm like the mayor of a village, right? We're all, it's not this big place here. And so this idea that even in our little village, we would find a way to segment out into, oh, they're over there and I'm over. Listen, I like to say the last 8 years, my job and Vanessa's job has been to keep sewage out of your basement, right? And you might love Trump, you might love Bernie Sanders, you might, if I don't get sewage out of your basement, you ain't voting for me again. Right? My job is to make sure your 911 calls are answered faster than ever, right? And if it takes too long when mom or grandma or your child is in trouble for that paramedic to show up, I ain't getting your support no matter what. And I just see my brand of politics of trying to get back to that. There are things I believe in passionately. We are at, I mean, because there's change of mayor and county, maybe because we're making history in Washington with Sarah McBride and Lisa Blunt Rochester. Maybe we're not talking about it much, but this is kind of a scary time for the country right now, and we're a part of that country. And so one of my leading jobs is to make sure everyone is protected. That kid in the corner of my 6th grade class who was being made fun of because he talked a certain way or maybe was a little feminine or masculine or whatever, my job and our job is to make sure in a time when those kids and their parents are going to be seeing on TV that they ain't worth anything and they don't belong in our job is to make sure that this is a place for them. And maybe that makes me a progressive, maybe I don't know, but that's just what I believe and it's what we need. But I mean, I also said, given the opportunity, I'm going to cut your taxes, right? And quite frankly, if that guy in D.C. is going to come in and do some things that create value and create opportunity for Delaware, we're going to take every advantage of them, right? I don't really care, like that he's Trump or I didn't vote for him, but I don't care. I'm working with him if it's going to help people in this room and across our state. So that's kind of where I am.
Pretty much answered the question. I was going to say, as you prepare to take office along with President Trump, you said that you'd be willing to work with the president if it came to something that benefited Delawareans. But and that's even despite some concerns from some Democrats about working with the incoming Republican president. I know you recently, I think, went out to Denver for the National Governors Association meeting.
They teach us how to be governor. It's governor, teacher, governor school.
Kindergarten for governors. And I was curious, what is the conversation like being a governor coming into the Trump 2.0 era? And does that change how you approach this role versus if it was a Harris administration?
It's interesting because I think maybe more than any other conference in the country right now, or certainly any other political conference, there's a lot of excitement around governors now in the gubernatorial space, and particularly among Democratic governors, and particularly in blue states, that we're going to have an opportunity to show how things work right. I hope to the Lord, and I do pray every day that things work out right in Washington for our country, but if things start to go off the rails a little bit, state government is going to be more important than ever before in making sure we protect people and making sure we do smart things. We grow our economy in smart ways. It's hard for us to go to Washington and say Delaware has it right and blue states have it right when we're like 46th in the country in our test scores in 3rd and 8th grade for public schools. We need to perform. We need to make sure we're producing outcomes that all Delawareans deserve, no matter where they're from, and it's an opportunity for all of us to work together to achieve those things.
One of the big concerns coming with the Trump 2.0 agenda is obviously this promise that he's made about mass deportations. And there's a lot of Hispanic families here in the state that are concerned about what that may mean for them if they're documented, undocumented. Have you ever, have you given any weight, any consideration to an executive order that would make Delaware, a sanctuary state that wouldn't work with immigrations and customs enforcement?
We're going to protect people. That's all. We have no tolerance for anyone in Delaware going door to door or looking for people who are doing no wrong, doing nothing but trying to feed their family, and trying to send them away. We're going to protect people. Having said that, our immigration system in this country is a mess. And we'll do whatever we can to partner to make sure borders are secure, to make sure people who are here have a pathway to citizenship. We also, listen, there was an incident, I've been an elected official during Trump times before as county executive, and it ain't no cup of tea. It's like every day that there's a curveball being thrown at you. We had a situation a few months into my first year as county executive where a young child in Pike Creek was kidnapped. Just in front of a young girl playing in front of her house was kidnapped. and was taken from Pike Creek, and we knew from some cameras was driven through Ellesmere and ultimately into a park, into Parkland. The young girl fortunately was found 12 hours later. During that, you can imagine our police were out there and they were knocking on doors in Ellesmere. They were trying to reconstruct the path. The neighborhoods in Ellesmere were predominantly Mexican, and during those early Trump years, or maybe during any Trump years, when a police comes to their door or calls, they ain't answering. And so we had a problem that we could see cameras. We couldn't even find the people to talk to get the information. And let me tell you something, that made all of us less safe. That made all of us less safe. So what I said shortly after there, we had a safe and inclusive communities order where I said, call your county police. You will never get in trouble. We're not gonna ask you, what country you're from or what your immigration status is. We don't care. We wanna make sure you are safe, and to be honest, that especially goes to individuals in domestic violence situations, that we don't care where you're from, what your papers say, whatever. We need to keep you safe, and we need to keep everyone safe, and we want people to feel free to call the police. We want them to go to libraries, be educated. If they have some symptoms of a communicable disease, we want them to go see a doctor and not be fearful to go do so. Yeah, I believe in police accountability. I also think being a police officer in 2025 is just about the hardest job. Imagine if you have an obligation when you see wrongdoing to run towards it and make sure everything's okay and keep people safe. And while you're doing it, just about everyone pulls out their cell phone or you have a body-worn camera to analyze and assess everything you're doing. And there's a good chance if you make one false move, or even if you don't make one false move, it's gonna be plastered on social media. I think that's the world we live in. I think there are a lot of individuals and groups fighting against that. From my perspective, there needs to be accountability, right? My deal with our cops in Newcastle County is there's additional responsibilities and additional accountability, and we're gonna compensate you for it. You're gonna be better compensated as police officers than you've ever been compensated before, and there are additional responsibilities and stresses that come along with that. So that's what we're looking to do. I think there are a few under Pod Pat. I'm not even sure what the post-Leobor law. There's Russ, do you know what it is? Or Tizzy? Do you know the pop quiz? I don't know what the acronym is, but under the new police accountability, I believe it requires every jurisdiction, every police agency to have an accountability board. In Newcastle County, I think it was working pretty well. There might be a few tweaks we need to make to that, but I'm looking forward to seeing how that works across the state in various jurisdictions.
Maybe lastly, you obviously welcomed a son to the world, so congratulations on that as well. One of the things in your public safety plan that you've discussed is greater need for gun control and really what that means for future generations. I'm curious, being a dad now, has that changed your thoughts on any of your kind of policy positions, given the maybe greater urgency? I think some of the things in your gun control policy is like requiring gun locks on all firearms sold in the state. Wondering if that's kind of an outgrowth of some of that thinking.
Yeah, I think a lot of people in Delaware hunt. Traditionally, up until a few years ago, thanks to the leadership of Senator Lockman, who may have walked out, and others, things have changed. But traditionally, it was hard to enact any gun control legislation, any reasonable controls on gun ownership. I think there's got to be a space for us to enable and allow hunters to hunt while keeping our children safe, to make sure that the level of gun violence, even right here in Dover, doesn't happen. It's really, I mean, Laurel, Seaford, these are places that I know to be kind of sleepy towns where they're safe and quiet communities, and it's really not that way anymore. And it's my responsibility, or it will be my responsibility in 11 days as governor, to make sure that 13 days as governor, to make sure that we're leading the way in keeping particularly kids safe. And certainly it does my 11-month-old Levi. And I should say, for anyone with young children, if your child's having any trouble sleeping, might even old children too, just find one of my speeches and start playing it. And Levi goes right at 12 hours. He's gone. All he has to do is hear one of my speeches. But it certainly does create urgency about a lot of things. I want Levi to go to not just public school, but great public school. I want him to go to the best schools in the country, and I want them to be here in Delaware. And I obviously want him to grow up in a community that's safe, where he doesn't have to worry about gun violence. It's amazing that just our uniquely American culture. I've already counted 3 times, as he's almost 11 months old, that he's been in a room with play guns. He's been in a room with play guns. And so it's the culture in which we live, and we got to work on it. I think we all have work to do. We've worked out like a half-time, where I think we're gonna sort of spend half the week at Woodburn. I don't know if it's gonna work. Like, living in 2 places is kind of crazy. Some of you may know my wife is an emergency room doctor, and without having 2 houses, our lives are great. She did 2 overnights over the weekend. So we'll see. It's gonna play out, but we're gonna be opening up Woodburn, where we're gonna be encouraging people to come see it. I had never been in it until a few weeks ago, and we're gonna encourage people to come and see. Well, good luck with a 1-year-old in the 1700s farmhouse there at Woodburn. I just want to thank Governor-Elect Matt Meyer one more time for taking time out of his busy schedule to